Greetings, I'm Zachary Hebner. I'm pleased to share this Dvar Torah with you for Parashat Ki Tavo. A novel therapy to PTSD described by Barry Ellen is using writing, I quote, a comparatively quick treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder in which a patient writes about traumatic experiences, effective as the therapies most recommended by federal agencies. The treatment, called written exposure therapy, involves asking clients to write down the thoughts and feelings that occurred during the traumatic event, and then speak with a therapist about the writing process. The patient vividly imagines the terrifying situation and then between sessions confronts real-life reminders of it. In 2018, a study by the same team found that written exposure therapy was as effective as cognitive processing therapy. Patients were asked to write by hand, which takes longer and allow them to engage with the memory. It's a slower process that allows them to better think through what happened next and who was there and what did they say because they're writing about it. From this New York Times article, my father has suggested that, quote, Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, which are called in Hebrew tochachot, rebukes, were written as pre-traumatic therapy, and in order to be therapeutic, should be read out loud and not in an undertone, yet they are traditionally read in an undertone, end quote. My father further suggests that his prolific nature of writing poetry may constitute his PTSD therapy. Maybe, maybe not, but it is noteworthy to cite a relevant story related by Rabbi Shlomo Riskin in his book Listening to God, page 59. In 1952, young Riskin went to pray with the Rebbe of Sanz Klausenberg, who had established a Beit Knesset and Beit Medrash at the Beth Moses Hospital. Yekutiel Yehuda Halberstam was a Rebbe of the Hasidic Daini of Sanz Klausenberg and an Auschwitz survivor. Many of the co-worshippers were newly immigrant Holocaust survivors. The Rebbe, one of them. As the Baal Korah began to recite the Deuteronomy 28 chastisement, which is traditionally chanted in an undertone, the Rebbe ordered the reader, hecher, which means louder. The Torah reader immediately stopped reading and seemed to hesitate for a few moments. I could almost hear him pondering, did the Rebbe actually say louder? Would their Rebbe go against the custom of Israel in all congregations to chant the curses rapidly and in a barely audible voice? The reader apparently decided that he had been mistaken in what he had thought the Rebbe had said, and continued reading in a whisper. The Rebbe, turning around to face the congregation, banged on the lectern, his eyes blazing. Echob gezot hecher. I said, louder. He shouted out, let the Master of the universe hear. We have nothing to be afraid of. We have already received all of the curses and more. Let the Almighty hear, and let him understand that the time has come to send the blessings. I was trembling, my body bathed in sweat. Many people around were silently sobbing. The Rebbe turned back to his lectern, facing the wall. The Torah reader continued to chant the curses loudly and distinctively and in a much slower cadence, end quote. Holocaust and PTSD, that's a loaded topic, but the Zanzer Rebbe was generations ahead of his time. Bring it on. Talk about it loudly. In the contemporary environment, people revel in being victims, a status symbol that may be worse than the root cause. The Zanzer Rebbe was insisting on the fluidity of the rebuke, namely that blessings and generational blessings follow the rebuke at the end of the pericope. Divine rebuke leads to communal tshuva, and communal tshuva will lead to a closeness to the divine that will entail blessings. But perhaps the Rebbe was in touch with the danger of PTSD. The PTSD of the Shoah is a field of study on of itself, and I am no scholar of such academia, but I'm acutely aware that this trauma does not only affect the Gruners, Gruners being the original term that was replaced with the term Holocaust survivor, but this trauma has evolved or devolved into generational trauma. Zanzer Rebbe in his wisdom, wanted to put a full stop to the PTSD. The curses are over. May the Almighty herald the abundance of blessings that are also included in the contract. Perhaps the Rebbe did not want any victim to live a life with the label of victim, stretching out the victimhood. My Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef David Weisberg, Yosela, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, one of the greatest Mohalim of the 20th century and chief Mohel of Israel, was a devoted Zanzer Chassid, which brings more meaning to this story for me personally. What a profound insight and forward-looking attitude at a time that the present and the future was looking bleak. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.